This man's life took a turn when the well-known saying about love being blind gained an unexpected and bitter significance. Love not only blinded him, but it also turned into betrayal. Divorce was just one consequence, as his reputation also suffered. He couldn't help but notice the sympathetic and sometimes mocking glances from those around him, all stemming from his unfaithful wife's deception. The weight of betrayal and the realization of what happened pressed down on him with tremendous force. Seeking support and advice, he turned to others, hoping to find validation for his actions and guidance for the future. As a result of this drama, his self-confidence was shaken, and now he constantly doubts his own decisions. Any help and support were invaluable to him during this difficult period. He expressed his gratitude to everyone who took the time to listen to his story. "I came home late, intoxicated, after a wild bachelor party that got out of control. When I rang the doorbell, something incredible happened. It's one of the craziest things that has ever happened to me, and it changed my life forever," he says. He is 77 years old, divorced, and has no children. He admits that he managed to ruin not only his marriage, but also his relationships with family and friends. It was that night that everything started to fall apart. His car disappeared as if it had vanished into thin air. He couldn't find it where he had left it and was completely bewildered. He had to call to find out what happened. It had only happened the night before, so he doubted that anything could have happened to the car, which was parked in a secure complex. So, what really happened? What secret lies behind the disappearance of the car, and how is it connected to the betrayal and the ruined life? The answers to these questions may be unexpected and shocking. Suddenly, it dawned on her, and she hurriedly checked the contents of her purse, but the car key was not there. She didn't remember losing it, as she hadn't taken it out the night before. Overcome with panic, she realized that she would face serious consequences if Zane, her husband, found out about the missing car, which he had given her as a wedding gift. However, unwilling to resort to lies, she decided to call him and tell him everything. She hoped for his understanding, believing that he wouldn't blame her too much if he heard the truth from her rather than from someone else. With a trembling voice, trying to hide the anxiety that gripped her, she told Zane that she couldn't find the car where she had left it the night before. In response, she heard only his chuckle on the other end of the line. Confused, she asked him why he was laughing, to which he replied that he had taken the car to the auto shop early in the morning for maintenance. She couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief, which only caused Zane to laugh even more. The reason for her search for the car was a party. What could a married woman be doing at a party, you ask? The fact is that she was invited to a bachelor party, which, however, differed from the traditional notions of such events, where ladies are limited to renting a VIP room in a club or visiting a strip club. It was a mixed party where representatives of both sexes gathered in a mansion belonging to one of their friends. She promised her husband that she would return home before it got too late or dark, and if she was delayed, she would call him to pick her up. It was known that in a state of intoxication, she became prone to tears and loss of consciousness, and she would rather bite off her tongue than put herself in an awkward position in front of so many people. So, she decided to leave before she went too far and before Zane started worrying about her. She didn't expect to stay there for so long. Initially, she didn't plan to spend too much time at the house, but before she knew it, she had been there until midnight, participating in various games and entertainment. In the end, she drank so much that she felt a burning sensation in her eyes and decided it was time to leave. She went to the guests of honor, who, to her pleasant surprise, turned out to be old friends, and said goodbye to them. Melody, her longtime friend with whom they grew up, began to beg her to stay a little longer, but in response, she just laughed, explaining that she really had to go. In the end, Melody agreed and let go of her hand, allowing her to leave the hospitable house and head back. She told her friend about her intention to call Zane and ask him to pick her up, so she needed to go outside to make the call. However, attempts to contact Zane were unsuccessful. He did not answer her calls. Panic began to grow in her soul, but she understood that she could not get behind the wheel in that condition. There were two options left: call a cab or reach out to the designated driver. But then a paranoid thought popped into her head that the designated driver might be a kidnapper, so she decided to go with a cab to get home safely at this late hour. The cab dropped her off near the entrance of her building. Staggering, she approached the door, trying to open the lock with her keys. But even though the keys fit, the door stubbornly refused to open. Then she decided to look for the doorbell on the side of the door. Finding it, she began to ring insistently, repeatedly pressing the button, because it seemed funny to her tipsy mind. Her husband appeared from behind the door, and his face was frozen in undisguised anger. The heroine of the story found herself in an awkward situation, trying to hide her intoxication. It was a funny sight. Staggering on high heels, she tried to maintain her balance, but as soon as she saw her husband's face, she was overcome with embarrassment. Zane, her husband, merely raised an eyebrow, crossed his arms over his chest, and leaning against the doorframe, began to watch her struggles. Under his piercing gaze, she felt uncomfortable, and their visual duel ended in her defeat as she could not withstand his cold stare. The silence was broken by Zane's heavy sigh, full of irritation, and his words made her recoil. He sarcastically suggested that she go back to where she came from. Amazement was reflected in her eyes, and she shook her head, trying to understand what he meant. Zane just chuckled dryly and stated that he was joking, advising her to quickly take her drunk self inside before she embarrassed him any further. Despite her fright, Zane's smile made her relax. He even reached out to help her enter the house, supporting her so she wouldn't fall on the way to the stairs. Zane helped her up the steps, holding her by the waist to keep her on her feet. Reaching the room, she almost collapsed with relief, and her knees buckled. Zane laughed at her and then got down on one knee to help her take off her heels while she sat on the floor. She thanked him, feeling embarrassed and looking away as he massaged her tired ankles. Then he filled the tub and asked her to go wash while he made the bed. The heroine was so exhausted that she didn't notice how her husband picked up her clothes from the floor and put her shoes away. All she remembered was her head touching the soft pillows, and she fell into a deep, serene sleep. Waking up the next morning was surprisingly late, but it didn't cause her much concern. Saturday morning offered an opportunity to laze in bed, but urgent matters forced her to get up. A painful hangover, like an anvil, pressed down on her head. Overcoming the pain, she reached for the bedside table, where the thoughtful Zane had left water and aspirin. After taking the medicine, she went to the bathroom to freshen up and leave the house. She had to pick up her car, which had been left at a friend's house. She did not find her husband in the house, only a note on the kitchen table, next to which was a plate with 2 sandwiches. In the note, Zane reported that his father had called him, and they had to leave early. She just nodded, putting the note in the drawer where his short messages were usually kept, and started breakfast. 2 weeks were relentlessly approaching, and her car was still in the unknown. Zane didn't say a word about the car or the auto repair shop where he took it. The complete uncertainty forced her to either ask her husband for a ride to work or use taxi services when Zane was unavailable or busy. Of course, she tried to find out from Zane the fate of the car and the timing of its return, but in response she heard only evasive phrases. Later, I'll call the mechanic, or I'll find out at the shop about the progress of the work. Knowing Zane's character, she learned to bite her tongue in time so as not to cause his irritation. She felt that he would share information when he was ready. A week after her last question about the car, Zane stopped touching her food. He constantly referred to a lack of appetite or a mood to eat the dishes she prepared, which forced her to dine and have breakfast alone. She was lost in conjecture, trying to understand what was happening to her husband. He showed no signs of illness and did not look exhausted as he used to. His behavior simply became unnaturally cold towards her. Puzzled and not knowing what to do, she decided to call his older sister. The heroine of the story picked up the phone and asking who was calling made the narrator freeze in amazement. After numerous conversations with Zane's sister, the latter should certainly have saved the caller's number. However, instead of a greeting, the voice on the phone asked who was speaking. Gathering her courage, the girl introduced herself, giving her name. In response, the woman's voice instantly turned cold as she demanded an explanation of the purpose of the call. Her tone was coarse and sharp, which caused a wave of anger in the caller, but she suppressed it, reminding herself of her sister-in-law's considerable age and the need to remain calm and respectful. The girl explained that the brother of the person she was talking to had stopped having dinner at home, and she expressed her concern about this fact. The response was a question as to whether this concerned Zane's sister and why she was being called with such questions. The caller replied that she was only afraid for her husband and wanted to know if he had shared his concerns about what was happening in the family with his sister. Suddenly, her sister-in-law's tone became hostile, and she asked what right the caller had to interfere in her brother's personal conversations with family members and why she was so concerned about how he spent his free time. The narrator had never heard Zane's sister talk to her in such a tone before. She was literally shouting into the phone. The girl apologized hastily, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. In response, she heard that she had nothing to regret if she learned to mind her own business and avoid unnecessary calls. After these words, the connection was broken. The phone was dropped with such force that a sharp click rang in her ear. The situation continued to develop according to a predictable scenario. Zane seemed to deliberately shorten the time they spent together, and his avoidance of dinners together turned into an outright refusal of the proposed dishes, motivated by their inconsistency with his current preferences. The kitchen sink witnessed an accumulation of dirty dishes that far exceeded the usual amount, and the refrigerator was filled with a collection of containers with leftovers, many of which were labeled with Zane's name and marked "Do Not Touch." Despite the fact that the couple shared the same bed, the intimacy between them was fading, giving way to an invisible gap that Zane did not seem to want to bridge, demonstrating a clear satisfaction with the situation. During a traditional meeting with her friends, including Melody, Tasha, and 2 other friends, the heroine, under the influence of alcohol, could not restrain her emotions and burst into tears, complaining about Zane's estrangement and seeking comfort on Melody's shoulder. Her friend, showing sympathy, stroked her back, trying to calm her with encouraging words and joking remarks. However, Tasha, rolling her eyes, expressed dissatisfaction and reproached the heroine for excessive dramatization due to what she considered a minor neglect on her husband's part. Outraged by this attitude, the heroine angrily reminded her that Zane was her lawful husband. In response to the raised tone, Tasha just smirked and offered a simple solution to the problem, comparable to the reason for their bachelorette party: alcohol. The heroine, not understanding the hint, looked at her friend in bewilderment. Tasha, in turn, with an air of superiority, stated that you can always pin him to the wall and seduce him to find out the reason for his behavior. In a state of intoxication, this idea seemed quite reasonable to the heroine, and her mood improved noticeably. She again demanded a new serving of drinks, not noticing the alarming exchange of glances between Tasha and Melody. In Melody's eyes, there was concern and even panic, while Tasha's expression remained mysterious. Despite an intuitive sense of danger, the heroine, blinded by alcohol and a sudden burst of enthusiasm, did not pay due attention to this, preferring to return to carefree toasts and fun with her friends, enjoying the weekend evening. A month passed and the inexplicable happened. 2 memorable rings disappeared. One of them was an elegant silver ring, decorated with an artfully cut diamond, and the other was a simple silver ring, but with an unusual coating of an additional layer of silver. These decorations had special meaning for her. The first ring was an engagement ring, a symbol of her love and promise, and the second, with a more complex design, was a wedding ring, a sign of their union. The loss of these rings was a real blow to her, a loss comparable to the loss of something very valuable. She remembered taking them off to wash the dishes, as she usually did. When she finished her housework, her husband went somewhere. A moment flashed in her memory when Zane briefly entered the house while she was in the kitchen. He called her, and she noticed him looking into the kitchen, giving her a strange look, as if watching her while she washed the dishes. She gave him a sweet smile, but he didn't respond, which she chalked up to a fleeting phase in their relationship, as Melody had advised her. The rings disappeared shortly after this episode, and she had no idea to blame Zane. It seemed illogical to her that he could take the rings that he had given her himself. Even the loss of the car did not arouse her suspicion, and she simply decided that she had lost the rings. Despite this, she decided to recreate the wedding ring. The design and feel were familiar to her, and she had photos to replicate it exactly. This thought calmed her down a little. It hadn't been 7 days since she discovered her rings were missing and decided to have her wedding band redesigned when Zane decided to leave their home. It wasn't a typical departure. He simply packed his things and left. One evening, when he returned from work, she inquired about his plans, to which he casually replied that he was going to visit his family. However, his words didn't ring true, given the sizable suitcase packed with work clothes and going-out shoes. When she pointed this out, he responded with rudeness. Zane irritably asked what business it was of hers if he wanted to spend more than just the weekend with his family. He declared that since she was so interested in knowing his whereabouts, he would stay there for a whole week, allowing her to run the house as she pleased. In a fit of anger, he pushed her, causing her to lose her balance, though not enough to fall. Before getting into the car, he uttered a phrase that wounded her more deeply than the slight pain in her shoulder from his shove. "You can bring a new partner if you want." It was these words, full of resentment and contempt, that made her feel betrayed and devastated. She felt confused and bewildered. Zane's words threw her into turmoil, and an impulsive desire almost made her chase after him, demanding explanations. However, knowing Zane's difficult nature, she understood that instead of answers, she would likely only face cold rejection. Seeking understanding, she decided to turn to his friends, hoping to shed light on his strange behavior. Who could be a better candidate than Andy, his closest friend, former classmate, and someone from her hometown? The call to Andy caught him off guard. From the first words, his voice dripped with irritation and unconcealed dislike. He demanded that she not waste his time and get straight to the point. She hastily apologized, assuring him that she wouldn't take up much of his time, and explained that she simply needed the opinion of someone close to Zane, but not related to him, to understand his suddenly changed attitude. Andy merely sighed in response, wondering why she thought he possessed the information she needed. His voice was sharp, bordering on rudeness, and she barely managed to maintain her composure. After a series of unpleasant encounters with her husband's relatives, she wasn't about to tolerate such treatment from someone with whom she had spent years growing up. She expressed her displeasure to Andy, to which he only apologized, explaining that he didn't know how else to communicate with her. Completely bewildered, she tried to figure out what he meant, but Andy advised her to check their shared friends group chat, hinting that she would find answers to her questions there. Before she could ask clarifying questions, the line went dead. All subsequent attempts to reach Andy, even the next day, went unanswered. She had long since fallen out of active participation in the group chat, and so the meaning of Andy's remarks remained vague to her. However, she was still irritated that she was learning about problems with her husband from outside sources, rather than from him, with whom she had recently shared a bed. The moment she entered the chat, a barrage of messages overwhelmed her at such speed that it was impossible to keep track of them. But one cutting message from Tasha, in which her profile was tagged and contained the word shameful, instantly caught her attention. Others followed. Suddenly, a video appeared and then disappeared in the chat, which she missed. She quickly marked the message with the video tag to watch it later, when the flow of messages subsided a bit. But that didn't happen, and she was simply kicked out of the group, that is, removed from it. Now she couldn't reply to any of the messages. The date indicated that she had been removed from the group chat about a week ago, and since she hadn't opened the group for so long, she still had the opportunity to see the messages. Shocked by what had happened, she decided to postpone finding out the circumstances for later, as she had more important things to do. First, she decided to review all the messages sent before her exclusion from the group. The messages covered a period of about 2 months, and this time coincided with the beginning of Zane's strange behavior at home. Continuing to scroll through the feed, she read disturbing messages that portrayed her as a spiteful woman. Some messages condemned Melody for trying to defend her, threatening exclusion from the group if she continued in the same vein. In the end, Melody fell silent, and the others continued the conversation. Then she came across a message from Zane stating that it was better to talk when the subject of discussion, the root of the problem, was removed from the group. Next came detailed plans for Zane to leave the country and possibly seek new horizons. These mysterious messages continued until she was removed from the group. The protagonist was still trying to decipher the meaning of these enigmatic messages when the phone rang. It was Melody, whose call she was going to ignore, as she wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone, especially a friend who seemed to be involved in her husband's recent behavior. But Melody was persistent and kept calling, even after she hung up. Eventually, she decided to answer, figuring she could always go back to what she was doing after the conversation. Melody's voice on the phone sounded frantic. Due to the panicked mumbling and squealing, it was hard to understand what she was saying. The protagonist asked her to calm down and speak clearly. Melody announced her intention to immediately send a text message with the video footage that required immediate viewing. Without wasting a second, she ended the current phone call. Moreover, Melody strongly recommended refraining from any rash actions and calling back only after carefully reviewing the video. Obeying the instructions, she ended the call to focus on viewing the received message and attached video. In the first few seconds of the recording, there was a slight camera shake while the operator adjusted the angle of view. Soon, familiar outlines of figures appeared in the frame, after which the camera moved sharply, showing a group of people gathered in a lively circle. Loud cheers, laughter, and raised glasses of champagne, vodka, and bottles of beer created a festive atmosphere. The operator, making their way through the crowd, turned on the flashlight to illuminate the semi-darkness of the room. At the center of everyone's attention was a man with a woman comfortably sitting on his lap. Her arms were wrapped around the man's neck, and her outfit consisted of a sky blue ankle-length dress with a seductive slit up to mid-thigh and recognizable shiny strappy shoes with a sturdy heel. Her hair was neatly styled to the side, and silver hoop earrings sparkled in her ears. With horror, she realized that this woman was herself, captured in a moment of passionate kissing. The outfit unmistakably indicated that it was the very look in which she attended Melody's and her fiancé's bachelorette party some time ago. The protagonist was experiencing a deep crisis, on the verge of a panic attack. Gathering all her willpower, she made a desperate attempt to calm down and redialed Melody's number. The ill-fated video that had been spread in the group chat, from which she was subsequently excluded, flashed in her memory. It was with this video that Tasha branded her as shameless, and Name, it turned out, posted it in the group, after which he demonstratively left it. Shaking all over, the woman stared at the floor, barely perceiving Melody's cries, urging her to calm down. She didn't even realize that she had called her friend back, but suddenly noticed her vision blurring and moisture on her thighs. Unable to hold back the flood of tears, she ended the call and, exhausted, collapsed to the floor, where she writhed in hysterics until exhaustion plunged her into sleep. Waking up on the floor was marked by insistent phone calls. Melody was literally bombarding her with calls and alarming messages. With difficulty, she regained her senses, answered, assuring her friend that she was fine and they could talk later. After that, she got up to get ready for work. She desperately tried to contact Name, hoping for an explanation, but all her attempts were in vain. He either ignored her calls or cut off the conversation, claiming that they had nothing to talk about. The protagonist attempted a personal meeting, but Name flatly refused to see her. Moreover, his older sister indignantly kicked her out of the yard, showering her with insults and even hitting her, while categorically forbidding her from returning and looking for her brother, who himself did not want to see her. In tears, inconsolably sobbing, the woman left this place in the back seat of a taxi, heading home, broken and humiliated. At the moment when the protagonist was still trying to comprehend what was happening, the phone rang. It was Name, who reported that he had sent her a message and asked her to call back after reading its contents. What she saw in the sent video again caused a flood of tears, but she gathered all her willpower and dialed Name's number. He started the conversation by asking about her impressions of what she saw, asking if she liked the video. In a trembling voice, she answered negatively. In response, Name just smirked and asked why she was denying the obvious pleasure that he thought she had received. He strongly advised her not to deny it, emphasizing that she enjoyed herself so much in the video that he doubted the sincerity of her regrets. The protagonist's attempt to say something was interrupted by Name, who stated that now only he would speak, and she could only listen carefully. He announced that he was giving her complete freedom to do whatever she pleased and to have relationships with whomever she wanted without any restrictions or obstacles, since he also intended to leave and live by his own rules. Then, Name confessed that he had known about the video long before the bachelor party and had already made a final decision about it, so nothing she did could change his mind. After saying this with unwavering certainty, he ended the conversation, leaving her alone with her thoughts, drowning in tears. All subsequent attempts to reconnect with Name proved futile and meaningless. He didn't answer calls, stubbornly avoided meetings, and, of course, didn't give her a single chance to explain the situation. Thus, she found herself in agonizing anticipation of the moment when Name would deign to consider her worthy of his attention and agree to a conversation. A month after the ill-fated party, fate brought the heroine and Name together again, and this meeting took place within the walls of her own office. He appeared, holding a large brown envelope, the contents of which, as it turned out, were intended for her. Without further ado, he threw the envelope on the table and demanded that she immediately sign the papers inside. The heroine sensed such a turn of events, but did not expect the denouement to come so soon. The envelope contained divorce papers, which became a painful confirmation of her fears. She tried to beg for forgiveness and explain her behavior after the argument caused by that unfortunate video, but Name was adamant. He stated that he intended to see the divorce through, fearing that she might be drawn into even more serious problems or scandals than the one that occurred at the party. In Name's eyes, their marriage was already over. He no longer looked at her with love, did not treat her as his wife, and they had turned into mere roommates, awaiting only the formal completion of the divorce proceedings. After all, he wasn't the one exchanging intimacies with a stranger, and judging by the video, enjoying it. The heroine practically embraced this man, and she desperately tried to explain to Name that she was too drunk to realize what was happening, but her words went unheeded. Name had made a decision, and she had no choice but to pack her things and leave their shared home. The heroine desperately begged Name for a short delay to collect her thoughts and get herself together, after which she promised to sign all the necessary documents without complaint. In response, Name only rolled his eyes, expressing obvious disdain for her request, but still agreed, waving her off and leaving the office. It is worth noting that in this situation, he showed a certain restraint and even politeness. However, the heroine understood the true reason for this behavior perfectly. Name sought to avoid any scandal or disgrace that could be associated with his name. That is why he preferred to quietly come to the office, refraining from shouting and demanding that she immediately sign the papers. In reality, his anger was immense. He was even more than just angry. Engrossed in agonizing thoughts, the heroine looked at the documents again as she left her office and headed home. Or rather, this place could hardly be called home in the full sense of the word, because it no longer had the familiar warmth and comfort. Name had been living with his sister for 3 months. That's how long it had been since that fateful day when the heroine confronted him and they had a conversation about that scandalous video. Then, Name did not restrain his anger, dragging her into their former bedroom, fortunately soundproofed, where he unleashed a torrent of reproaches and insults on her, not mincing words and calling her an adulteress who had no right to make claims against someone who had been faithful to her even before the wedding. These words, like sharp daggers, deeply wounded the heroine, depriving her of her voice. Name possessed a rare gift, skillfully hiding his true feelings, revealing to the world only the image he deemed necessary. Despite their apparent closeness, the narrator realizes that her knowledge of him was superficial. After receiving certain documents, Name unhesitatingly demanded that she leave his house, plunging her into a state of deep shock. He coldly stated that all the events of recent days had inexorably led to this moment, the moment of her expulsion. Suddenly, her eyes filled with tears, and streams of despair flowed down her cheeks. Name only rolled his eyes contemptuously, cynically asking if witches were capable of showing emotions anywhere but in the bedroom. Choking with sobs, she tried to figure out the meaning of his words. At that moment, another voice rang out from above, breaking the agonizing silence. Name's older sister appeared on the stairs, struggling to drag a huge suitcase behind her. Overcoming fatigue, she angrily threw the luggage down. Name burst into laughter, watching his sister gasp for breath, sarcastically remarking that he didn't understand how a woman who treated marriage so lightly could have accumulated so many belongings in the home of a man she didn't plan to stay with. The brother and sister, united in their cynical amusement, reveled in her heartache, while she, stunned, watched the cruel scene unfold, unable to comprehend how her own family could so callously toy with her emotions. She desperately fought the urge to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break, but the burden was too much to bear. Right there, before their eyes, she crumbled, tears streaming down her face like a torrent. At that moment, her siblings seized the opportunity to amplify their cruelty, showering her with mockery and labeling her tears as crocodile tears, before walking past her without a shred of empathy. In this unbearable setting, Name suddenly stopped and uttered words that felt like a final judgment. He strongly advised her to leave the house as soon as possible, before evening, or even immediately if she could manage it. He added that she should leave some of her clothes in the closet, except for those already packed in the suitcase that his sister had carried downstairs. In his opinion, she didn't need to take those clothes with her, as Name was the one who had bought them. Disgust was evident in his eyes as he declared that he would rather burn the clothes than let her take them, since she wasn't going to return the rings, which were still in the car. Turning sharply, she noticed Name cast a fleeting glance at her, a hint of sadness flickering in his eyes, before he rolled them and walked out of the house to join his sister, who was waiting for him in the car. Name was the real reason for the missing rings. They weren't lost, and the car wasn't at the repair shop for service or maintenance. Name had taken back absolutely everything he had ever given her during their marriage. In this way, Name decided to punish her for her actions, stripping her of everything that had once symbolized their union. An endless stream of tears soaked the floor as she, heartbroken, clutched the fateful brown envelope in her hands. Sinking to the floor and crumpling the paper helplessly, she desperately clawed at her hair, resembling a bereaved widow who had lost everything, and indeed, her soul was shrouded in mourning, and her heart was a gaping void. New circumstances revealed that the incriminating video had been secretly filmed by Tasha, the bride's chief bridesmaid, during the infamous bachelor party that had ignited this heartbreaking drama. It was Tasha, whose treachery knew no bounds, who was the true culprit behind what had transpired. The camera's placement during the video recording left no doubt about her involvement. Long-standing envy had consumed Tasha, and she had long harbored a desire to have Name for herself. The bachelor party became the perfect opportunity for her to sow discord between Name and his beloved. Her cunning plan was to destroy their marriage, portraying herself as a savior and an angel in disguise after she had presented her rival in the most unflattering light. Melody, a close friend, confirmed the suspicions, revealing that it was Tasha who had suggested the ill-fated game of truth or dare during the party. Trusting and naive, she unhesitatingly accepted all the drinks that Tasha offered her. Tasha, in turn, seized every opportunity to ply her with alcohol until she reached a state of extreme intoxication, all the while egging her on to participate in the game. Melody confided that if she hadn't had to excuse herself to go upstairs with her fiancé, she would have personally intervened to stop Tasha's actions. It emerged that Tasha, using anonymity, had forwarded the compromising video to the storyteller's husband. The motive behind this act, it turned out, was to renew her persistent attempts to win over Name, with whom she worked in the same organization. During a face-to-face confrontation with Melody, Tasha admitted to her actions, expressing bitter regret that Name, fully aware of her feelings, had rejected her, despite his divorce from the storyteller. Tasha's gaze, full of undisguised malice, was fixed directly on the storyteller as she declared that under different circumstances, she would have stopped at nothing, even hiring men to stage an affair to completely destroy the storyteller's marriage. The revelations from the person she had considered her friend plunged her into a state of profound shock, forcing her to rethink her entire approach to choosing friends. The realization that what had happened was a carefully planned provocation brought some relief, but it could not completely erase her feelings of guilt. In Name's eyes and in her own, she remained guilty, as no amount of intoxication could excuse her behavior at the party, where she, a married woman, allowed herself to kiss another man and engage in intimate touching in the presence of many, albeit equally intoxicated and carefree, friends and acquaintances. Despite the pleasant sensations of the kiss, the protagonist felt deep anxiety, understanding that this fleeting episode could cause the collapse of her family life. However, her attempts to convey her feelings to Name were unsuccessful. He remained adamant, stating that nothing would make him change his mind, as he did not want to see a woman capable of frivolous acts by his side, regardless of the circumstances. Realizing that she was powerless to change the situation, the protagonist experiences the bitterness of losing the person she loves. The cause was her excessive frankness and loss of control under the influence of alcohol. She feels self-hatred for what happened. This experience became a painful lesson for her on how important it is to be careful in choosing friends and to trust her secrets only to trusted people. At the same time, she does not absolve herself of responsibility for what happened, acknowledging that it was her actions that led to such sad consequences.